Just let it in.
And while I don't officially call it my nerd world anymore, it is still my nerd world. I'm your host, Jon Justice, a Star Wars show. Thank you so much for checking out another episode. This week we'll be talking about the latest in the Star Wars Skeleton Crew series, Episode 5. And I'll be working off an article from Screen Rant, The Secret of Star Wars' Treasure Planet Revealed, why At-Aten is really so important to the galaxy, and I have my own thoughts on their speculation, including a little bit of a disagreement here. I think there may be somewhat of a red herring going on with what the actual treasure on At-Aten is. That being said, my speculations have been all over the place and anything but accurate at this point in time. I am loving this show, though, and I'll talk more about that here in just a moment. As always, if you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show up on YouTube, be sure to leave a comment there and subscribe to the channel as well. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. As a matter of fact, I was just posting online. A friend to my weekly radio show had shared with me a post from the Babylon Bee, 35-year-old man's Christmas haul, indistinguishable from 9-year-old boys. Now, what's hysterical about this and why he ended up sending this to me is because I posted online yesterday what I had received for Christmas, and it pretty much falls under that category. So, finally got the movie Contact on Blu-ray. I know it's not Star Wars related, but it is sci-fi related. Absolutely love that film, and I had not watched that film in a long, long time. I believe I had a VHS copy of it. Never went and upgraded, maybe a DVD, but never upgraded to the Blu-ray. So it had been quite a long time since I'd seen it, and coming off of the heels of watching Interstellar, I never realized, I guess I hadn't really thought about it, right? I hadn't thought about the fact that there are a ton of parallels between the movie Contact with Matthew McConaughey, right, and beyond just Matthew McConaughey starring in it, and Jodie Foster in Contact. But there's just a lot of just central themes, threads that run through the story. It would make a fantastic, albeit lengthy, double feature. Interstellar isn't nearly as earnest as Christopher Nolan's Interstellar isn't nearly as earnest as Robert Zemeckis is, and certainly not as earnest as Contact is, but still a fantastic movie. I also got myself a Hardy Bluetooth speaker. It lights up. I asked for one that lit up and has a bunch of colors on it because I'm a nerd. Also, I got the Jazzwares T6 shuttle from the Ahsoka series, a ship that I was not a fan of, but grew into being a huge fan of. And if you're not familiar with the Jazzwares line of Star Wars ships, they really do a fantastic job. The only complaint that I've had over Jazzwares is they're all made of plastic, and so the smaller ships tend to be really light. So they feel cheap, but they're not. It's just more of an aesthetic issue with me than it is a design or detail issue. This T6, though, my son and I were examining it last night, Logan and I, my 22-year-old, and we were really marveling over the quality of the detail in this particular ship. I also picked up a couple of the Hot Wheels die-cast ships, which I like quite a bit. I got the Ghost, which I was bummed about because it doesn't have the Phantom attached to it, but neither here nor there. Also the E-Wing, which made its first appearance from the comic books, but on the screen in the Ahsoka series, and I really love the design of the E-Wing. So yes, apart from Contact, not particularly being a film for kids, everything else that I got was pretty much geared towards children, because I don't think I've matured beyond the age of 17. So I hope that you had a fantastic Christmas and a great New Year's, depending on how the schedule for the podcast goes next week. But let's talk about this week's episode of Skeleton Crew, a show that continues to not disappoint.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
Now, as I mentioned on last week's episode, I know that the ratings for Skeleton Crew are not fantastic by any stretch, and that's a bit of a disappointment. That being said, I think that's okay. Because this show, I hope people will find. But beyond that, it is providing a lot of goodwill among the fandom. There is still a small portion of the fandom that's not into it. I get it, but it's mostly geared around it being for, I think, sort of geared towards kids. That being said, the consensus seems to be that everybody is enjoying this show, even if there's not a ton of people watching it. I just enjoy the fact that we're getting a fun weekly Star Wars series. We're getting into the mythology of what they're laying out. I'm hoping that this connects to the broader universe, especially the Mandoverse. That being said, every show is just kind of a joy to watch. My biggest complaint is just how short the episodes are, as I've mentioned, because I just want more to digest, knowing full well that we'll have the entire series to sit back and enjoy once it's all done. We have 3 episodes left. The next episode, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, coming on next Tuesday, and then the week after that, January 7th, episode 7 by Lee Isaac Chung, and then the final episode by the writer and showrunner of the show, John Watts. That will arrive, episode 8, on January 14th. So, hopefully they open up these next few episodes. It feels like we're getting closer and closer to some reveals while still individuals within the show are being hidden. And I have an overall question of whether or not they're being hidden because this is going to be a massive reveal for the audience, or is it just going to be a big reveal for the characters in the show? So let's get into the Screen Rant article based off of episode 5, gradually building up the mystery of At-Aten. And what they write in Screen Rant is, the episode finally revealed its big secret, if that is indeed the big secret of At-Aten. The first Skeleton Crew episodes quickly established, of course, that At-Aten had fallen into legend after being cut off from the greater Star Wars galaxy. But every pirate had heard the story of the planet's treasure. This is setting up the fascinating quest for the heroes to discover At-Aten's secret and, of course, eventually go and find their way home. And I do apologize. I slipped my finger over my mouse. I record these shows for live, and unfortunately, by doing so, I clicked away from my page. So now I'm just getting back to the article itself. So my apologies for that. The end of the episode, by the way, and I definitely want to talk about this, it took a turn, and the stakes really were raised. And this was the first episode that my wife said after it was over that this is the first time watching the show that she genuinely wanted to watch the next episode and was genuinely looking forward to next week's episode. And it's because we're starting to get into the meat of the show. I think they really would have been better if they had combined some of these episodes, made them longer, to give us more to chew on and just had fewer episodes. Be that as it may, that's not where we are. All right. Sadly, the revelation of At-Aten's treasure caused Jod Na-Na-Wood to succumb to greed and betray his crew, which was especially tragic after the bond that he formed with Wim earlier in the episode, which has me believing, by the way, using the same lines and quotes from Qui-Gon Jinn, that at this moment, I'm of the opinion that Jod is a former Jedi turned scoundrel. Almost as if he's become sort of a Han Solo, but the opposite of Han Solo, meaning that he actually has a background in the Jedi arts and the Force, whereas Han Solo didn't, even though he's taken on that same sort of role as Han Solo. And I was surprised at sort of how dark and scary the episode got at the end, when Jod was threatening Fern with the knife. But it's funny because I was, like, as I'm watching the episode, I'm like, wow, I'm surprised the show was going there. That being said, the inspiration for the show was based off of Goonies and Amblin shows, where there was legitimate cause of concern, even though you knew the kids weren't going to get hurt, they put them in real jeopardy. So while it seemed somewhat out of place for a brief moment for me, considering how dark it was getting and that Jod was threatening Fern's life, again, I was quickly sort of reminding myself that, no, this is based off of what we knew from the 80s, and there were real stakes in the 80s, even if we knew the kids would ultimately be safe. Getting back to the piece, Jod and any other cutthroat pirates who learn about At-Aten's treasure will now be motivated to not just find the treasure planet, but to conquer its people. It may also reveal more about the galaxy during the Old Republic era in Star Wars canon. So when Jod and his crew discover the last recording of the pirate captain Tak Renaud, they learn that At-Aten is the last remaining Old Republic mint. Now, this may very well be why the planet is so special. I'm looking at this from a lens of Star Wars, and a lot of times you just have these circumstances where things aren't exactly what they seem, but it could be that this really is the true reason why the planet is considered a treasure planet is because it's the last remaining Old Republic mint. Now, I also thought it was interesting that we did not get a good look at Captain Tak Renaud's face. So again, was this being hidden because it'll be a revelation to the characters in the show, or is it being hidden because it'll be a revelation to us viewers, just like the headless statue on at Akron? Fern explains that the mints are for printing money, meaning anyone who finds At-Aten will ultimately have an unlimited supply of Old Republic credits. Overwhelmed by greed, Jod betrays the crew and takes Fern's place as the captain, forcing them to escape through a trap door. At-Aten, being an Old Republic mint, explains why credits are so plentiful among its populace, and printing more is presumably the great work they speak of. So again, this may all be on the up and up. I'm just putting a bit of a caveat that, perhaps this is a red herring in all of this. Now, At-Aten being an Old Republic mint, the article goes on to say, would explain why the credits are so plentiful, as we mentioned. However, since the planet is secluded and most people think it's a myth, pirates could easily take over At-Aten and have an unlimited supply of money all to themselves. Now, this may be heading to what I was theorizing, and that eventually the pirates will reach At-Aten, and there'll be a standoff between the pirates and the citizens of At-Aten protecting itself, which is where the canon that came in from last week's episode could potentially go and come into play. The kids now have to find their way home with no help if they want to save their families. Now, considering how At-Aten and its sister planets were called the Jewels of the Old Republic, it's safe to assume that these worlds are also Old Republic mints. This would explain, this would explain why At-Aten is the only planet left, as the other jewels were likely targeted by pirates and scoundrels who wanted an unlimited supply of money. That will give the people of At-Aten plenty of motivation to go into hiding and forbid traveling to other worlds. There was also some other pretty exciting Easter eggs and reveals to the galaxy's ancient pirate history. A lot of people were pointing to in Tak Renaud's den, there was a lot of statues that were pointing to other things, and individuals saying that perhaps these are clues. I just think that they were fun little Easter eggs that were in his pirate cove that he, had there for us, the viewer, to sort of pontificate over or ponder over, that don't have anything necessary to do with the furthering of the story in and of itself. Skeleton Crew Episode 5 provides answers but also raises more questions. The jewels are a window into seeing what the Old Republic was like at the height of its power, while the shadowy and distorted image of Captain Renaud hints at a darkly intriguing story. Perhaps there are more Star Wars mysteries left to be revealed, as I mentioned in Skeleton Crew's 3 remaining episodes. I thought that the bit with Wim and the lightsaber, which my son Kyle said he probably has it upside down, and sure enough, he did. I thought that was a really interesting bit, and the fact that Jod now has a lightsaber in his hand. My expectation would be that there will be a turn at the last minute back to help the kids. The lightsaber will come into play, and we'll get a revelation of what Jod's true background with the Jedi actually is when we get into those final episodes. As always, though, what do you think? I'd love to hear from you. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Tell me what Star Wars items that you got for Christmas. I'd love to talk about that on next week's episode. But also want to get your thoughts on Skeleton Crew as well. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
We do have a few emails that came in from last week. First off, Mr. Bacon and Legs writes, I get that content creators need to stay up to date on things, but I really don't see what episode 4 added to the story that the first 3 episodes didn't already allude to or outright tell us. If you're going to stick with such a short runtime and have a weekly release schedule, your weekly release needs to build on what came before it instead of wasting our precious few minutes of the episode regurgitating details from the previous week's episode. Episode 4 can be summed up as Fat Kid Throws Rocks because the rest of it is there were other planets like Ad-Aten, which was basically already the summary of episode 3. Thank you so much for the comment. I completely disagree with your take on episode 4. While it wasn't the most exciting episode, it did accomplish several things beyond what you mentioned here. Yes, it did talk about there were other planets like Ad-Aten, but we also found out that Ad-Aten was being hidden for a reason. We also found out that SM-33 was programmed to keep Ad-Aten hidden. The characters and the children in the show all went through their own different personal circumstances that ultimately leads to their growth, which I believe is going to pay off at the end with whatever the final climactic battle will be. They'll have already had to have faced a potential enemy and rose to the occasion only to, in episode 4, be bailed out because Jod went and paid off the other individuals. There was a lot that was in episode 4 that relates to furthering the story beyond what I think just a first glance would go and share. I think if you really go and stop to think about what they did to progress the story along in a relatively short period of time, that's what they did. I think you'd have a bigger complaint if that episode was longer and only did what it did. It being as short as it was feels like a filler. That being said, when you wedge in 20, 25 minutes and you get in just some concentrated story arcs and specific details, it does go and further the story. But again, all of this is subjective, and I appreciate your comment. Let's see. Eric Pabke writes, I hope they get a second season. This show has been much better than I thought it was going to be. And thank you to both of you for dropping listener feedback this week. And again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Or if you're enjoying this up on YouTube, leave a comment there. All right, listen, that wraps up this week's episode. As always, if you're looking for something over your New Year's break to sink your teeth into, something new to read, and you enjoy science fiction, obviously, check out my science fiction space opera series. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with a sci-fi adventure. I wrote EMBARK and all 7 of the completed series books for adults, but it is completely age-appropriate for those 11 and older. It's available in hardcover, paperback, audiobook, free on Kindle Unlimited, and of course on ebook as well. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with some romance and action, then EMBARK is perfect for you. Available on Amazon.com. The description for book 1, Taft has found something and humanity won't survive without it. When ship mechanic Taft Guardia agrees to help starfighter pilot Keith Amaro investigate a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father, they embark on a perilous journey of discovery amid a looming planet-wide industrial catastrophe. In the middle of a global evacuation, 2 rival megacorporations are on the brink of interstellar war as Taft, Keitha, and their ragtag crew discover what may be the only hope of saving Earth's evacuees from annihilation. Pick up this fast-paced and action-packed sci-fi adventure today. Head on over to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK and Jon Justice, and you'll find the entire series there. I look forward to hearing from you, and until next week, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. Early Happy New Year, and I'll talk to you again after episode 6 of Skeleton Crew.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.